in America. So they have law enforcement and they have child protective services. And those are the two entities that get involved when there are allegations of child abuse. Child protective services across the country does not have, they employ social workers. The social workers do not have the training, first of all, to investigate child abuse, because child abuse is a crime. And so we've just covered this in a way where parents were emailing me. I mean, there was postings saying, I knew it. I've been, my case has been going on for 6 years, and I've been trying to tell them this is a crime. And you are the first person to finally bring somebody out to verify it. So Child Protective Services has been taking these cases, and actually they don't have any training to do so. Sexual abuse and physical abuse is a crime. And if I can just encourage your audience to call law enforcement if the allegations are physical or sexual abuse. They are trained to handle crimes.
And not the Child Protective Services.
Child Protective Services are trained to handle allegations of maltreatment, neglect, lighter...
Orphans, kids, right?
Children that...
Child homelessness.
Exactly. But ironically, even law enforcement, Dan Scott, who ran the child abuse unit here in Los Angeles, he was the sergeant with the sheriff's department, and he said, we also handle orphans as well, which I didn't even know. So there's a lot of components to it, but I really have to encourage people, because the minute that you call Child Protective Services, you can rest assured that the investigation will not be done properly. Chances are the child will not be protected. I mean, here in Los Angeles, in 2013, Child Protective Services took thousands of children away from parents. 570 children were murdered that were actually taken away from what Child Protective Services deemed to be unsafe homes, only to be murdered and killed within the homes that they put these children in.
Wow.
Only in Los Angeles County.
Wow.
Only.
That's a huge
number.
Who could they turn these kids over to?
Right.
Freddy Krueger? It's pretty gruesome.
I'm glad that you asked that, Sean, because actually what we did discover, and Los Angeles Times was kind enough to publish this, when we looked into it, 1,000 convicted sex offenders were given a green light to become approved foster parents. 1,000 only in Los Angeles County.
That's pretty frightening.
Very frightening.
And how do they get approved?
That's what we're trying to determine. I mean, we know that you have to go through fingerprinting. It's a very convoluted system.
Sure.
Molesters are not really considered so dangerous if they have been rehabilitated. And what does that mean, rehabilitated? They've gone to some classes. Maybe they've completed 26 weeks of therapy, and they feel much better. What people have to understand is a pedophile, in the course of that pedophile's lifetime, will molest between 100 and 140 different children. So when we see these pedophiles that have molested this child and they get caught, please do not think for a moment that this is the only child. This is the only child that had the courage to come forward and say what this pedophile, male or female, 20% of pedophiles are females.
Well, one of the things that I know you've talked about is the sexual abuse that takes place, or just physical or sexual abuse that takes place within the family, and then the fact that oftentimes when the parents divorce, the children end up mostly with the abuser.
That's right.
Now, describe what's going on here.
It's such a sick system right now, and nationally, I mean, there are thousands and thousands of parents from every state that are experiencing this. The child discloses abuse to one of the parents, and I'll leave the genders out. And that parent then goes forward and either, if they're in the midst of a divorce, brings this information via ex parte, right? Files an ex parte hearing with the court and says, my gosh, my child has just disclosed abuse to me, and my child is petrified, and you need to give us a protection order because this parent is abusing. Well, the court sees that as a combative, non-friendly parent. And in the United States right now, friendly parenting will allow you to be able to keep custody. Unfriendly parents...
Because they're friendly to the court.
Friendly to the court.
As well. So as the court discerns, obviously, if you're going along with it or not.
If it's a high contentious divorce involving child custody, the parent who is friendly will get the child. The parent who is desperate to have this child, who they believe,
and the court,
got raped.
The court, of course, isn't the judge, because there's no trial by jury in this case.
There's no trial by jury.
So whoever's friendlier to the judge, in a sense.
That's right.
Being
whoever the judge
be all
sees,
end all of justice.
That's right.
In the situation.
As being friendly.
Mm-hmm.
If you complain, well, you're not friendly. If you make these allegations, you're just not friendly. So the numbers, the statistics at this particular juncture is 85% of the parents that report abuse to the courts will lose custody and be placed on supervised visitation with a visitation monitor, a professional one. And it will cost them anywhere from $40 per hour to see their child up to $200 per hour. So it's a machine that breaks parents. I mean, so badly that there have actually been cases where the parent has said, Your Honor, I can't afford to see my child anymore. And I have that liberty that is afforded to me to maintain a relationship with my child. And the judge will look over documents and expense reports, and he'll say, well, I see here that you have a college fund. Cash it out.
Meanwhile, the child has no say, of course. They have no voice in this whole procedure.
The children don't come into the courtroom unless the judge asks for them to. And in the state of California, they just lowered the age for a child to actually be able to have a voice, that being 14. Before then, it was really at the discretion of the judge, and oftentimes, we have professionals that can handle it. And if it is a high conflict divorce, well, the courts want to appoint their own professionals that they work with. And that's more money.
Well, let's go back to the issue of the court and really the power of the judge in the court who sits on the bench, right, or the bank. Now, we've heard this Kids for Cash case, right? Describe a little bit of what that entailed, because obviously there's a lot of corruption that's going on in this one case that's come out, let alone obviously a much bigger system that might be permitting this. But explain what happened with that Kids for Cash.
Well, Kids for Cash was out of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has so much corruption that has been uncovered, and perhaps because one situation such as Kids for Cash got exploited, then everything got exploited. Pennsylvania is one of those little hidden places where a lot can go on. So that particular judge was sending these children, deeming them to have behavioral defiant issues, and sending them to a juvenile delinquent facility. This juvenile delinquent facility that he would send them to, lo and behold, he was part owner of. So, Kids for Cash.
Kind of a conflict of interest there.
I would say so.
In this case, it was actually a perfect marriage of interests.
Absolutely, and lots of money. And I feel very confident to say that the money that they have been able to find and deem him as having collected couldn't begin to touch on the money that has actually gone through his hands.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of payoffs that go on. From attorneys who pay off judges, and the media has covered some cases, And ironically, there have been attorneys who have paid judges $300 to get a decision. So when we think of...
It's pretty cheap.
Talk about selling yourself for nothing, right? And a judge.
It's pretty cheap.
But if you're talking about 100 cases a week and 5 minutes...
Well, what is the judge... describe a little bit of the financial interest that the judge can have in the juvenile detention. How do we privatize this system, right? The point being that these systems are able to profit from prisoners, which doesn't make sense, I think, logically to us, because we're thinking, shouldn't penitentiaries actually just be a burden on the taxpayer? How how is it that this can actually be how can you make profit
Right.
from prison?
Well, adult penitentiaries, I mean, we all in the United States, California, we pay $48,000 per prisoner. I don't know if you knew that yet. So for children, it can run anywhere up to $1 million a year for one child.
Wow.
Because you are talking about, you have their doctors there that say, we cannot contain this child, so this child needs extra care. This child needs psychotropic drugs. This child needs whatever this child needs. These facilities, well, I'll give you a good example. I had a case that I was familiar with, I'd rather say that. And the mom in this case, the judge here in Los Angeles, a judge that typically gets it wrong and really should be in prison, he sent this child, her boy, to a behavioral modification camp, and that's what they call them, behavioral modification camps, because you're just not listening and you're very defiant.
It's slightly better than brainwashing camp.
Right.
You get the point.
But ironically, that's exactly what it is, and they actually gave this young man who was quite fine and just wanted to exercise his ability to speak on behalf of himself. They actually gave him shock treatments. It cost the mother $7,000 a week. She is still to date paying, and her son is now 23. She will be paying for about the next 10 years. All the while, the court did not need to tell this mother where they were sending this child, and to date, she doesn't know where her child was ever sent, but she just paid. Imagine that.
He's 23, but they can still hold him?
No, they don't hold him anymore. They still hold her accountable for that back fee.
Right, but you said she doesn't know where he went.
While he was in that facility,
Oh, I see.
they did not name the facility. So for all we know, it could have been a Kids for Cash type of setup. Mm-hmm. Where was he? What facility? It became a sealed situation where only the judge knew. Who knows? And this happens a lot. The judges have the ability to seal these cases, so nobody from the media or from the public or even the parents have the ability to look and see what's going on. It's really scary. If you don't have transparency, chances are, I mean, you have a recipe for corruption in such a large way.
What kind of started your activism? What motivated you to get involved and become an advocate for child protection in this sense?
Well, I started years ago when I saw a young child being abused, and I was rather young myself, I ended up taking her in for 2 years. And, 25 years later, I get this email from her, and she says, some people believe in Jesus, some people believe in a higher power. You are my savior. I've been looking for you for 25 years. And it was just like, oh, sometimes you don't get a thank you. Sometimes you get a blame. Why didn't you do more? And when you see those situations, she's a mom. Her life went great. I ended up setting her up with father's family that she never knew because her mom kept her from her father, her biological father. And so she lived a really good life. She's wonderful now. So that's what really started me. And, I was a victim at one point in my life, and I won't get into that too much, but so I understand what it's like to be a victim. And when I hear about these cases with these children that are desperate for protection, and they are silenced as if in a prisoner type of war camp, and the more that they talk, then the more that they are deemed to have behavioral problems.
That's the scary part.
It's so terrible.
You don't listen to the kids. And
nobody does.
It is an interesting question as to why that is. Obviously, because they're not deemed legal citizens. They're not 18. They don't really exist.
They can't vote
on their own in our country, right?
That's right. They can't pay taxes. They can't vote.
They can't have free speech. They can't have.
That's it. They have no powers. Actually, in our country right now, we are only one of 2 countries, industrialized countries in the world, that have yet to sign the Safe Child Treaty Act.
Really? United
States and, ironically, Somalia. Out of the whole
world.
Doesn't
really even have much of a government anyway.
Hello.
So it's hard for them to...
United States. When we look at the United States, I mean, everybody thinks, I mean, we are, the power force. I don't know anymore.
What would that act entail?
Well, it would protect children. It would give them a voice. Children right now are considered property.
Right.
That's it. They are property. When you go
into...
into...
slavery is.
It's no different. That's exactly what the black slaves were put up on, the pedestal for. Who wants to buy him and how much or her? And that's what it is when you walk into divorce court. That child, who often isn't there, but is written down on that piece of paper, more or less like a deed, who can pay the most? And who wants this child the most? And it's almost like, who has the most? And let's hear the highest bidder.
That's very much what slavery was.
And that's very much what is happening right now. And I often say when I'm out protesting or having a demonstration or I'm in Washington, slavery is not dead.
That we know alone from the fact that there's more slaves in the world now than ever.
That's right.
The human trafficking situation is astounding, and the fact of sex slavery, I mean, even the issue of prostitution itself as being a form of slavery, for example. But
That's right.
Have you encountered much of this human trafficking amongst children?
Amongst children? We need to cover it a lot more. I'll give you a good example. Child Protective Services that I mentioned a little while ago. In Orange County last year, they had a bust for these traffickers. They got 105 people, victims of trafficking, human trafficking. 65% of those victims were wards of Child Protective Services. Not only were they wards of Child Protective Services, but check this out. They were never reported missing. Wow.
So maybe they were literally sold.
Well,
people in Child Protective Services.
Well, what we're finding now is this trafficking is a lot bigger and a lot more involved politically than we care to look at or the media won't cover. Everybody's afraid because there's some real big heavy hitters that are very influential that are involved.
And the acquisition of the children was for sexual purposes?
Absolutely. Children are sold, and there have been cases, children are sold up to 75 times in one day. One day. 75 different Johns abuse this child. It's making the child trafficking industry, or human trafficking, I should say, industry right now makes more money than the illegal drug trade and illegal arms trade combined. So children are definitely a commodity. They're a commodity to make money. Mm-hmm. Last year I had a case where a lovely young girl was single mom. Mom's a great Italian woman, lives in Burbank. And she was having some problems with her daughter. Her daughter started hanging out with the wrong, crowd. Good girl, though. Just, needed to be pulled back in. Yeah.
Ring. She'll end up robbing from Paris Hilton's house like the bling ring was.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So, Mom calls a friend at the police department. She says, I'd like to put a little scare. I want to do something. I want to make sure she's okay. And, he says, call Child Protective Services. Okay, I'll try it. She called Child Protective Services. They said, we need to take her and, help out here. They put this child, gorgeous, I mean, she looks like a model, 16 years old, 15 at the time, in this group home. The mom goes to visit her. It was near the holidays. Goes to visit her. She feels like, all right, she's going to learn her lesson. She'll never mess up again. This is a hardcore lesson. Her daughter's gone. Her daughter and 3 other beautiful young girls. Now, you have to bear in mind, Sean, that the gates around this group home, locally, are high. They're too high, and they are locked, and they're electronic. You are not getting out.
Yeah.
And there's a full staff. Well, the staff says, gee, we were short-staffed, and we just don't know how this gate got open. This mother daily for over 1 year hosted, she came on my show. She did not stop looking for her daughter. Her daughter is home. She found her through the efforts of a combined community effort. And she is still healing. She was passed on to more people. She was so abused. She was locked up. She was a prisoner.
And it was basically sold to a sex.
Her and 3 others from a state-run group home. And how did the gates get open? Well, it was near the holidays, and they just don't have an answer. Senator Bell up in Northern California, he's a big advocate on, the foster care system. And he's been pushing for these foster children to have a little more protection. Okay. A colleague of mine that runs an organization called the Humanitarian Alliance, what she found out is 48 hours after a child is aged out, meaning they're 18 and they leave their foster homes, within 48 hours, 60 to 75% of them are captured. How can that be? 48 hours. Definitely there's an insider.
Captured in the sense of?
Child trafficking. Not child anymore.
Right.
Human trafficking.
Right.
You're talking different homes, private homes. If you're talking about a 48-hour window, then certainly there has to be a group on the inside that is giving these addresses for a fee, no different than Kids for Cash, and allowing these traffickers who make more money than God only knows to go in and snatch these people. People that don't have a name, people that don't have families, people that have been within a system, and as soon as they leave...
Of course, it's easy targets. They don't have an identity within the system, and as you said...
It's the homeless person out that nobody cares about. He's a John Doe or a Jane Doe.
Yeah. That's very frightening.
So frightening.
I mean, it makes sense in the context of what you hear statistics of how many hundreds of thousands of kids go missing.
That's right.
On a yearly basis.
That's right.
And I mean, granted, obviously some of them are runaways that get found, or might be missed with a relative or whatnot, kidnapped by relatives. But beyond the ones that we can discount, where are these kids going?
Where are they? Child Protective Services in America does not have a duty to report a child missing when the child is determined a ward of the state.
Right.
Even if the child is taken temporarily, they don't report them missing. And if they do, because the parents are very proactively involved in some capacity, it's never right away. Any parent, your child is gone after a certain amount of time, what happens? You're calling the police, you're worried, you're calling parents, you're looking around, you're in your car. These kids that become part of the system, they don't have anybody to watch their backs. They're really on their own.
It's Oliver Twist, modern day.
It certainly is.
So, for you, the main advocacy, just across the board, would be for something like the Child Protection Act. That's the title of the National Child Protection Act. Essentially, the idea of giving more voice and empowering the children. Or what are the other things that you think could be done to reform this system? Obviously, that seems to be profiting off of the sale and capture and whatnot of kids.
So, within the Child Protective Services, there are social workers. There are some great social workers, and I don't want to point at the system as a whole of being faulty. However, it is faulty enough where it needs to be reformed desperately, because there is no accountability for social workers when they alter their documents that they present to the court. The judge sitting on the bench has about 5 to 7 minutes to look at a case in its entirety and make a decision that determines the outcome of this child's life. 5 to 7 minutes. And if the social worker is swayed, sometimes just because, I've heard social workers say, I don't like the way that mother does her makeup. She's a weirdo and she should not be a parent. Legislature has established certain rules, it's not being followed. If a social worker is not accountable and there's no legal ramifications, what's to stop them?
presumably, in normal cases, you'd have a trial by jury, I suppose. That's the only difference.
There isn't any.
With this nature of the court system.
There's no trial by jury unless...
Well, there's no trial in this case anyway.
Well, no, there is a trial.
Well, I guess of the parents, right?
Well, no, the child is afforded a trial. If it's in dependency court, children's court, that right becomes, they have a right to a trial. It's never with a jury. It's with a single, godlike man or a woman in a black robe, the judge.
That sits on the bank.
Yes. And that judge, if they're having a bad day, the child could be screwed. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no oversight. Nobody is checking on these numbers. And every case within the dependency system is sealed. Nobody has a right to look. This is the problem. It has to be. Judge Nash...
The transparency you were talking about.
Yes. There was a presiding judge in Los Angeles at the Children's Court. He pushed, and because he was the presiding judge over the courthouse, he said, we're going to open these courtrooms up, at least just to media. And media knows the guidelines, and they won't overstep. Well, I don't know how this happened, but a minor took her case to the appellate court and said, I do not want these cases open. A minor doesn't do something like that. Obviously, there was a driving force. Perhaps there was some payment behind that. But as a result, the appellate court overturned the decision that this judge made. It would have been perfect. If you close the doors and you have free reign, chances are in society you're not going to do the right thing.
But that's what your group is here for, basically. National Safe Child
Yes.
is a group that's basically saying we're going to be the ones who are pushing for transparency, looking into these cases, advising, counseling, aiding
That's right.
parents vis-a-vis...
And children.
Exactly. Well, but the parents are probably the ones coming to you, basically saying...
Sometimes.
We need advocates for the children, but also the children can come to you if necessary.
That's right.
The point is that you're there advocating for the kids and helping parents, oftentimes vis-a-vis their kids, or even vis-a-vis other parents, right? If there's
That's
an
right.
abusive spouse or whatnot,
That's
they're trying to
right.
protect their child from.
That's right. So we have parents that come to us. Last week, we had 2 children that came to us that were adopted by an African-American woman. They were white, half white, half Hispanic, had been with this woman since the girl is 17, boy is just turned 16. She's been abusing them their whole life. They were adopted. She has 3 other adopted children. The woman's 60 years old. The department just gave her preemie twins, newborns, 4 years ago. A 60-year-old.
But she has a track record of...
No. And she has a track record of grabbing kids from the system, and the system is eager to give them.
Right.
Do I think that there are some payments going on? Well, a 60-year-old single woman raising 5 children...
She's collecting from welfare in that case, probably.
It's not welfare, no.
Not welfare, it's...
Every child, I'm glad you bring this up.
I call it welfare, but the state basically is
well, it's a different program,
yeah.
And it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So the state, when you adopt through DCFS, through Child Protective Services, you get a stipend, monthly stipend, until the child is 18 or 19 or even more if the child is staying in school.
Mm-hmm.
So in this particular case, these 2 children reached out, and this is a beautiful outcome presently because we were able to get these children to safety. There's a biological uncle who's a federal employee, thank God, involved. I've been walking them through. I have beautiful emails. The kids are calling me, and it's a beautiful situation. I received a call, I don't know, a couple of days after we were able to save these kids from the adoptive mom. She actually got my private number to threaten my life. Yeah, it's very interesting how when you screw with somebody's money, then you see their true colors.
Yeah. But that's, again, that makes sense as to why some people are doing this. They're not taking kids in out of the charity of their own hearts. It's really to collect money from the state.
Well, that's what it definitely is. I mean, these 2 white children she has a 2-story home. They have been forced to sleep outside since they've been 4 and 5 years old because they're dogs, because white people are dogs. So you sleep outside with the dogs.
You told them that?
Oh, yeah. No, their whole lives.
Wow.
I mean, this 16-year-old boy, when I spoke with him, he wanted to commit suicide. He just couldn't take it anymore. They had photographs, they had videos of the abuse that they had given to Child Protective Services, that they had given to law enforcement. The problem was this woman was so close-knit with these people because she was this great woman who adopted.
So the Child Protective Services,
They came to the house.
But they would never question the kids, or they didn't care anyway.
Law enforcement called the kids brats, and they should appreciate that this woman has taken them in.
Right.
And the Child Protective Services would actually sit down and have coffee because they were buds. And it was only this one African-American woman who always went, and regardless of the photographs that they've provided to me, that they provided to these entities, there was no help. They were starved. Food was withheld as a punishment. I mean, these kids, bloodied lip, bruising, the pictures are tremendous. And they had no outlet for help. They were victims. And weren't even allowed on the second floor of the home because that was only for the black people.
Now, what if the kids had picked up a phone and called 911, for example?
They did.
In that case, if they allege a crime?
They did. Several times. They did, and we're actually compiling that right now. We have proof law enforcement went out on several occasions. They reached out to their school counselors to please. They were desperate, begging for help. There was nobody, and it's all documented. So I'm kind of going like this right now because I love civil litigation lawsuits. Because, you know, while they're dipping in those federal funds that you and I, Sean, and the rest of the general population is paying, taxpayers, it's time for us to come forward because really I think that the only thing to stop these people is to say, wait a minute, I'm sorry, that's our money and we're going to take it back now. And when they feel that hit below the belt, so to speak, they're gonna think twice. Something I really encourage if everybody would please pay attention to is federal funding that goes to these entities. Federal funding has very strict guidelines. You know, you are receiving this funding because you are doing X, Y, and Z service. If you do not do X, Y, and Z service, then that funding has to be removed from you. And not only does it have to be removed, but what you received while you were failing to do X, Y, and Z, you also have to pay back, including Child Protective Services, including the courts. There's federal funding that is given to these entities. So, folks, I can't encourage people enough. You can file Title VI complaints, Title V complaints, Title IV complaints. They're real. Anybody can contact me. I have a shell, a template. I'd be happy to give to anybody. It's time that we bring the money up because the money is a driving force that keeps this machine well-oiled.
You mentioned contacting you. What's the best means of doing so? You're obviously on a website.
We do, but actually right now we have two different websites and they're both being worked on. People try to hack in, so now we had to, up the... It's nice to know that we're obviously making some noise because my phone has been tapped I don't know how many times.
That's always a good sign.
Yeah, exactly.
If they're not watching
you,
you're not doing anything right.
I'm not scaring them. Right, that's right. So I'm happy about that.
So what is the best way to contact
you? They can contact me at voice, V-O-I-C-E, of, a child, A-C-H-I-L-D, R-I, at yahoo.com. Voice of a Child, R-I, at Yahoo. If they have a case, if they have concerns, people that are in divorce that have concerns that their partner is molesting their child, touching their child inappropriately, before you do anything, if you have the ability to have a poker face, I cannot recommend it enough. You don't know how long the child's going through it. The natural reaction is to freak out. Don't freak out. It could cost your child.
The judge might respond
That's right.
antagonistically towards you.
Not might, actually will. And you will be the histrionic, borderline personality, mental problemed parent. Instead, take your child to a therapist and don't let the other parent know. Get your child to disclose and do not question your child too much. If they're questioned too much, they then begin to close up And you need that child to open up to a professional who can go in as a neutral third party and tell what's really happening.
That's very good advice. So the best way to reach you right now until the website's back up is Voice of a Child RI at yahoo.com.
At yahoo.com.
And then you also have a weekly show, is it?
We do. I have a weekly show. It's the National Safe Child Show. It's on Friday evenings.
And it's on YouTube or? It's it's online show, or is it on?
It is. There is a studio on Sunset. It's Universal Broadcasting Network.
I'm saying to watch to see the show is on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Where do they find it?
It's on iTunes, podcast, ubnradio.com, under National Safe Child Show. We stream live, so we take callers every Friday at 7 p.m.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
that's 7 p.m. Pacific time.
Pacific time, yes, 10 p.m. Eastern. It gives parents an opportunity, when we have professionals come on, to ask these professionals about their cases. We have a legal analyst that is most times available, and so she will give legal advice. She specializes in dependency court as well as family court. We need to change laws. Laws need to be changed. Children need to have a voice. They need to be believed. Everybody knows it that is involved, and nobody believes it that is not involved. It's impossible to believe.
Well, I'm sure you've experienced and seen a lot firsthand, so no one's better than you to advocate and to do this work. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
I thank you so much for having me, Sean, and thank you for taking a real hard look at this and for covering this, because there's so few people that really are. And you're going to be an old man, not soon, not sooner than me, but, elder abuse, you'll need somebody to take care of you, and you don't want that person to be pissed off because they never had anybody listen.
Right. Well,
something to think about.
We don't want to perpetuate a system of abuse and violence, the cycle of abuse, and let that carry on.
That's
because
right.
very much, as our children go, so goes our country, so goes our future.
Yes, they are our future. Let's nurture, let's protect, and let's discourage violence and help our neighbors. It's not hard. It doesn't even cost anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Tammy, for joining us, and we advocate everyone. We encourage everyone to watch your show and to call upon you.
We go we go all the way. We have investigators, private eyes. We go undercover. If you need some help, call on us. We help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Well, there you have it, folks. A fascinating interview. And just a reminder that, as we said, our children are our future. And if we're not protecting them as a nation, what does that leave us as? What kind of barbarity, what kind of slavery are we imposing upon the next generation in their mindset more than anything?